Howdy. Today, our distance learning is going to take a look at a really trying time in American history, the 1990s, which we're going to see acts of domestic terrorism and cults. And, as a teacher, it's just one of those things where I was teaching during this time, and we do current events all the time. And sometimes I look at the news and I go, I just can't teach about this. This is just horrible, depressing. But my students would turn on the TV and they come in the classroom with questions going, how come this happened? So we're going to take a look at it delicately in U.S. history. The 1990s, a very different time. It was a time of terrorism. Yesterday's lesson talked about the Oklahoma City bombing, talked about the raid on Waco and Ruby Ridge. Today we're going to talk about the 1993 World Center Trade attack. Before 9/11, the World Trade Center was attacked by terrorists. We're going to take a look at the attack on the USS Cole. Even though it's in 2000, it's right on the edge. It's still really in this time period. It's the rise of Al-Qaeda, and it's a terrorist attack before 9/11. We're not going to have time to talk about everything, but there was U.S. embassies in Kenya and Tanzania were attacked by terrorist groups in the late 90s. That was horrible. 1996, the Summer Olympics in Atlanta, Georgia, there was an explosion in a park. As a matter of fact, there's a movie about that right now called The Trial of Richard Jewell. I've you guys seen that. That's about a security guard that's was accused of being connected to it and might not have been, but those are terrorist attacks. And we'll take a look at a guy named the Unabomber, just a whacked out guy who sent bombs to people and attacked society. Just crazy time. For cults, yesterday we talked about Branch Davidians and the far right people on Ruby Ridge. Today we're talking about a cult called Heaven's Gate, which was just crazy, tragic, sad. All right, let's jump into it. First person we're going to talk about is the Unabomber. We now know his name was Theodore Ted Kaczynski. He had been a child prodigy. He'd been a genius. He graduated from high school, I think it was like age 15, went to Harvard, became a professor at University of Berkeley, I think it was. And what he was just a genius in math. But he also had problems adjusting and fitting in. And he quit. He had been a college professor. He quit. And he moved up to the mountains in Montana and lived in a little shack. While there, he starts thinking about, how man is messing up nature and technology is ruining the world. And he starts sending out mail bombs. And over his career, he's going to kill 3 and wound about 29. But it was just the terror of it, the randomness of it. People were wondering, who is this person? Why are they sending those attacks? If you look on the right there's a picture of Ted Kaczynski. There's the cabin he lived in. And over there is a drawing. One of a witness of somebody seeing someone mailed a package came up with that drawing of the Unabomber. And if you look at that drawing of Kaczynski, it's actually a pretty good drawing of him. Well, anyhow, his attacks started and he starts sending mail bombs in the late 1970s. And he goes all the way up basically to the 1990s when he's caught. But what really catches him, and finally, is he'd been sending, pipe bombs to all sorts of random people, to people he disliked, people he thought were a threat, and all these. He had real tenuous reasons why he sent them things. But finally, he announced that he had a manifesto, what he believed in. And if he would let the newspapers publish it, he would stop sending pipe bombs. So a California paper did publish it. And imagine a guy's surprise reading it when he started thinking, this sounds like my brother Ted. And it was. The FBI would go ahead and arrest Ted Kaczynski, and in his cabin they found stuff. He eventually admitted, yeah, I did it. But here's the deal. During the trial, they wanted to try him they wanted to say he was insane for doing what he did and thoughts and everything. And Kaczynski did not want to be known as crazy. So he pled guilty, life sentence, so that they wouldn't describe him as being insane. I don't know about you, but that sounds kind of crazy. And his brother, the guy that turned him in, had a lot of conflicted issues. I mean, how would you feel if that was your brother? And then, on the other hand, if it was your testimony to put your brother in jail? It's just a weird time. Why do we mention it? Because the Unabomber is one of those things that affects America. Every now and again, you turn on the news and boom, there'd be something about another attack. It's kind of a random terrorism. And that was what the 90s, it was a weird time. All right, now let's talk about a cult. Marshall Applewhite and Heaven's Gate. You see the guy there? That guy. founded a cult. And this cult in California it was kind of crazy. He believed that aliens planted seeds on Earth, and seeds were people, and they would come and harvest the seeds, basically. There was a comet that was coming to Earth called Hale Bopp, and he believed it was actually either a spaceship or followed by a spaceship by aliens. And when they got close to Earth, they would take all the human seeds that they had planted and were basically worthy of it to space. So he got a bunch of people to believe him. They rented this mansion in California. It's a big mansion. And when the comet came close, they had themselves videotaped saying goodbye. There's a video of that on YouTube that's just real disturbing. Because you look at these people, they're so excited and happy and crazy. If you look at the picture there, the logo, Heaven's Gate, they had these little patches sewn on these black uniforms called Away Team. And when the comet came close and this nut Applewhite said it's time, they killed themselves, believing that their bodies would stay and their spirits would jump to this alien thing. If you look, they were found wearing black Nikes, and just a horrible thing that people could do it. And I mean, some of the stuff that happened ahead of time, castrating themselves voluntarily to get ready for the trip, kids, that's a cult, and that's just dangerous. 39 members would end up killing themselves. And it shocked America because, first off, not that it's crazy and these aliens are coming, but that people would go to that extreme and would listen to a crazy man like Applewhite. That shocked America. It's just really crazy. And it was in our first example of a cult. Back in the 1970s, a guy named Jim Jones had taken a bunch of people down to Guyana in South America. And when they were discovered and threatened, he went ahead and had mass killings there. So there have been cults. In California, there's also, Helter Skelter and the cults in the 1960s and stuff like that that would culminate very sadly in brutal murders and stuff like that. But the Heaven's Gate cult was just really so out there that it shocked America. It shocked America. And it wasn't a terrorist attack, but it was a violence that you went, whoa. During this time, Al Qaeda starts to rise up. If you look at the picture over there, this guy right over here, this is Saddam Hussein. Obviously, he's still in power in Iraq after Desert Storm. And so we have forces in Saudi Arabia to keep him in check and keep an eye on him. This guy over here is Osama bin Laden. His family owned a very big construction company. As a matter of fact, years ago when I taught at Burke, there was a kid whose dad had worked for the Osama bin Laden construction company, and he had a business card for the Bin Laden Corporation. And it was one of those funny things. After 9/11, he said, "I just don't show too many people that." But the family was wealthy. But the son, Osama bin Laden, becomes a crazy guy. He becomes a holy warrior, and he's mad at the U.S. for being in Saudi Arabia. He's mad that Saudi Arabia is allowing us there. And hiding out in Afghanistan, he starts training people, and he forms a group called Al Qaeda to get even with the United States. And there's a very good possibility that Al Qaeda later on would be behind the attack on the coal, as well as attacks in Africa and stuff like that. But at first, we really don't pay attention. And the Saudi Arabians, I mean, they're worried about Osama bin Laden. Nah, they're more worried about this guy right here, Saddam Hussein. And so they kind of overlook Al Qaeda in order to keep Americans connected with them so that they could, counter the threat of Iraq. But bin Laden is serious, and he decides he needs to make America pay attention. Okay. In 2000, the USS Cole, it's an Arleigh Burke destroyer, and it was in Aden, which is in Yemen. And it wasn't going to be in port very long when a small motorboat came out full of explosives and rammed the side of the Cole. And if you look at the picture right under the title, the huge hole was formed. 17 sailors were killed. But sailors are trained in stopping flooding, fighting fires, and not losing their ship. And the sailors on the Cole were able to courageously stop the leaking, save their ship. And if you look over here, there's on the bottom page, the Cole eventually was lifted out of the water, put on a boat, and brought back to NSH for fixing. But look at the hole that one boat did. Well, that was an attack on America. Another attack in America was of the World Trade Center. And I'm not talking about 9/11. No, kids, before 9/11, 8 years before then, the World Trade Centers were attacked. What this guy did, he's called the Blind Sheikh, Omar Abdel Raham, had an organization, and they were mad at the United States, and he put together an organization that basically planned on blowing up the World Trade Center. Well, think about the date, 1993. It's the same basic mindset of the Oklahoma City. Use a truck bomb. So they rented a Ryder truck. They drove it down into the parking garage and exploded the truck. However, the truck was not in the right spot. It blew a huge hole, like 60 foot or 80 foot across. I mean, it blew a big hole through a bunch of reinforced concrete. People were killed, but 6 killed wasn't what they wanted. They wanted the entire building to collapse, and they even hoped it would collapse into the other World Trade Center. There were a lot of people wounded. Up to 1,000 people were wounded in the bomb. But it wasn't a successful attack. Kind of ironically, one of the ways that they were able to unravel all this stuff, one of the conspirators went back to get his deposit, his $400 deposit, on the van that they had rented. And so they were able to arrest him, and they slowly unraveled everything. So the World Trade Center was attacked in the 90s. When you get to 9/11, that's entirely different. All right, now, I want to talk about a couple other things. These are not terrorist attacks, but it shows violence in America and just shock. The Rodney King beatings and the LA riots. This guy right over here in the lower corner is Rodney King. March 1991, Rodney King was pulled over by the police for driving under the influence. Well, it gets really confusing there. The police said he resisted arrest, so they were forced to use force on him. But what happened is somebody witnessed it and then videotaped the assault. I'm not going to show you a link about it here, but if you want to go on YouTube, there are links that will show you the assault of Rodney King tape. It's really hard to watch. It's brutal. A lot of the police officers they just use excessive force. Excessive force. Rodney King is beaten and it's horrible. It's a disturbing video to watch. And the police said that he was resisting arrest. If you watch the video, it's really disturbing. Well, the 4 policemen were put on trial for the assault on Rodney King. The trial was moved out of Los Angeles to a suburb, and Rodney King's assailants were acquitted. The cops were released. Now, being a policeman is a tough job. I understand that. There's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of cops out there that are heroes and just hardworking people. But these 4 individuals got wrapped up in excessive force. And when the public looked at that, they were outraged. There was a lot of anger because everybody watched the videos on TV, on the news. You saw the videos. It was really a stark attack. And then when you hear the news that the police that did it, those 4 officers were released, there was such anger and outrage in Los Angeles. It was crazy. The city erupted in violence. Oh my goodness. I mean, 63 people will be killed, 2,300 people wounded, $1 billion in damage in Los Angeles as the crowds attacked policemen, rioted, and burned buildings. Over 1,100 buildings would be set on fire. Eventually, the military would be called out to put down the riot. During the riot, horrible things happened, and when you watched the news, you saw the fire, the outrage. There were assaults on truck drivers. There was a truck driver by the name of Reginald Denny who was pulled out of his truck at a stoplight and was beaten by a crowd. It was just horribly and disturbing also. If you look down here again, Rodney King did have a video. When he came out during the riots and he pleaded for peace and he pleaded for people to stop, he didn't want people to be assaulted in his name. And you have to you have to think about that and respect that. There's a man who has been wronged, and he comes out trying to calm everything down. And, I have a lot of respect for him. Eventually, the military was called in, and peace, sadly, after a long, bitter time, finally was drugged into Los Angeles. And when it was all over and the buildings, if you saw the buildings that were burned, the video footage of everything, it was just a horrible time in America. The assault on Rodney King was bad. The riots, as a reaction, were bad. It was just a time that just, it was just an unrest. Now I gotta throw this in here because this is actually connected to L.A. in a way. Okay, 2 years after all that, O.J. Simpson. O.J. Simpson had been a football player and was an incredible running back. I mean, Buffalo Bills. He was incredible. His nickname was the Juice. And O.J. Simpson married a woman. There's a picture of O.J. and his wife Nicole. Okay, O.J. was a very jealous man, and Nicole claimed that O.J. had attacked her, and they were separated, and there was problems, and it was just a tempestuous relationship. Okay, well, on the night of June 12th, O.J. Simpson's wife, Nicole, ex-wife Nicole, and a guy named Ron Goldman, who'd been he's just kind of a connection to the case. Was he your friend? Did you just barely know her? Was she even closer? We don't know. But they were both found brutally stabbed to death at her house. Um, the shock and the outrage, if you see the pictures, there was so much blood there. It's just, wow. Well, O.J. Simpson had caught a flight to, I think it was Chicago that night, and he left, but he left his home, and there was a situation. If you're a policeman and a woman is attacked, all too often the first thing you want to talk to is the spouses and stuff. And at OJ's house, supposedly a bloody glove was found. OJ had a Bronco, and there was supposedly blood there. There was blood on socks at his home, but the murder weapon and the other stuff was not found. He had been carrying a bag when he went to the airport. Maybe dumped it, maybe didn't. Who knows? Well, the police want to talk to him. 19, June 17th, the white Bronco chase. Kids, if you look at that picture down in the corner, it broke on every TV station in America, whatever you were watching, until that was what everybody watched. But in that white Bronco in front of all those cop cars, O.J. Simpson is in the back, and he's holding a weapon to himself, and he's threatening to do himself harm. The driver is a friend of O.J.'s by the name of A.C. Cowlings, I believe it was. And he was driving, and he was telling the police that O.J. was in the car, was worried. And after, the Rodney King beating and everything like that, I can understand there was some concern and stuff. And so they had a slow speed chase through L.A. So you got the white Bronco, and you got all these police cars chasing him. Eventually, they go back to O.J.'s house. He's arrested. What happens then is the trial of the century, a lot of people called it. What it was it just became a trial. It was a televised trial that conquers America's attention. It was on like every news. At night, the news people talked about it. All the nightly comedy shows and the Tonight Show and all those people had skits about it. America became incredibly fascinated about it. Now, O.J. Simpson, this athlete who had also been an actor, hires a bunch of lawyers called the Dream Team. And if you look at the picture there of OJ with his hands up, right behind him is one of his Dream Team lawyers. And that guy was a genius. Because during the trial, OJ, they asked him to put on the gloves, the bloody gloves that are found. Now, if they're a leather glove and they've been sitting in blood, they're going to, absorb it, and they're going to shrink a little bit. Plus, OJ is going to have on, if you look at the picture there, he's got latex gloves underneath of it. You try to put a glove that's really tight anyhow, and it might have shrunk over latex, it just doesn't fit well. And one of the things that his lawyers flat out said, if the gloves do not fit, you must acquit. Because you know what? It was really slapshot. The police put together evidence, but in there, one of the policemen involved, the guy by the name of Mark Furman, was found to have said racist things. And the defense team was able to say, hey, maybe some of this evidence was planted. And in a murder trial, there's got to be, since this is a man's life on trial, you have to have proof beyond suspicion of doubt. And in the end, the jury didn't see it that way, and OJ won. Now, a lot of the people that heard when OJ's trial ended and people heard the count, a lot of people, a cheer went up, and to connect it back, a lot of people seem to think that the police that were acquitted of attacking Rodney King and that injustice was kind of in this case, OJ beat the system, and so a lot of people said, "Yeah, it was fairness." In reality, we have no idea if OJ is innocent or guilty. He was tried. However, after the trial, he cannot be tried again criminally. He was sued by Goldman's parents, and in that case, he did lose the lawsuit because the lawsuit, the civil lawsuit, said that he had responsibility. Years later, OJ, of course, tried to write a book, tried to get some money. He was really hurting. And the book was basically If I Killed My Wife. And in the book, he raises the hypothetical, if he did it, how he would have done it. And there's an interview that with OJ talking to a lady, and it's so disturbing because you listen to that interview and it really opens up what OJ's thinking about it and saying, wow. OJ Simpson later on, years later, would be arrested, not for this and put in jail, but he would be arrested for trying to regain some sports memorabilia. And he went to a hotel room with a gun and some guys, and he would be arrested for that. But this fits in the '90s because again, it's connected a little bit to the Los Angeles thing, the distrust of the police in Los Angeles at the time, and a reaction to the riots. But in America, it just shocked us and it consumed America. So in the end, the 1990s part two. Oh my goodness, take a look at all of this. And yet, kids, we're going to talk about the most disturbing thing of all of this era, the attack on Columbine High School. And tomorrow's lesson will be about Columbine and about when Americans were scared and shocked and feared in the day that changed everything for students and schools in America, the Columbine assaults. And on Classroom, there'll be some stuff we want you to do to take a look at it. There'll be some more links to these things right here that if you're interested in learning more about the coal or the World Trade Center bombing stuff, I'll put some links to it on the Classroom.